All right, cool. So, here with Bobby Campbell, artist, comic book artist primarily, right?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, maybe I should let you introduce yourself.
My name Bobby Campbell is what I go by for art stuff. Mainly, I would describe myself as a cartoonist.
Okay.
But yeah, the cartoonist, comic book artist, all the same kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so for people who don't know, you're into Robert Anton Wilson, and that sort of, I don't know if you would call it like a psychedelic scene, or I always find it hard to describe to people who aren't familiar with.
Especially because all those terms have kind of shifted around. Like I think early on, I would have said counterculture, but I don't know if that quite means the same thing that it used to mean. It's kind of its own weird little category. Maybe the term that's emerging for it is Discordian. Maybe that's the all-encompassing term that can kind of bring all that stuff in. It doesn't have outside associations where it muddles things.
Yeah, that's interesting. So he was a big part of shaping Discordianism, which was...
Yeah, for sure. I think he was probably the loudest voice in that. I think he shaped a lot of what actually came out of it. Right. He didn't originate it, but I think he certainly pushed it forward the furthest.
Right, and was that Kerry Thornley's idea?
Yeah, Kerry Thornley, and there was Gregory Hill was the other guy.
Oh, right.
Who was more private. I think Kerry Thornley was more out in the open, whereas I think Greg Hill was more reserved. I don't think he wanted to be famous.
That's right. I forget about Greg Hill sometimes. I don't know why.
I think he might have been like more the architect of it. I think Kerry Thornley was more like the manic energy inspiration, whereas I think Greg Hill was more the like structural, how do you form this into something that's coherent?
Oh, yeah.
How do you form something that's incoherent into something that's coherent enough to explain that it's incoherent? And I think that was Greg Hill's influence, but I'm guessing.
Kind of like the left brain, right brain.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Especially when you have two authors working together, you can kind of guess along which lines who's doing what. Sort of like an Illuminatus, you can guess what Bob Shea's doing versus what Raw's doing. But I'm sure sometimes you would be surprised how it actually teased out.
Yeah. Yeah, and then so for some reason, Church of the Subgenius isn't as associated with Raw, or.
No, the Subgenius is also, I believe, if not Raw inspired, became Raw inspired as it grew. Like you'll see Ivan Stang doing talks where he hints that the Bob in the Subgenius thing is Robert Anton Wilson. Like he plays around with that being the connection there, that he is the Bob.
Really?
Bob Dobbs.
Okay.
I mean, not explicitly, but there is definitely he wants there to be a connection. Clearly.
Yeah. Speaking of looking for connections, segue into because I was watching. It was Coffee Talks was the name of the video.
Oh yeah, Raw Coffee Talk.
Yeah, and I mean, I just thought it was so interesting, especially since you talk about the Dark Night of the Soul, and I've kind of had a similar experience not too long ago. Relates to that, and
right on. Wow.
Yeah, I was just wondering. Well, I mean, maybe you could just give a little more background for people who don't know, like how you got into Raw.
So I would not have initially been in the demographic of someone who would read stuff like this. I was, maybe casually, like I was into, I think the closest contact would have been reading stuff by like Alan Moore and Grant Morrison, but that was all like entertainment level stuff. There was no textbook reading in my diet. So I would characterize myself as like a slacker kid of the like late 90s, early 2000s. And so I wasn't particularly into anything, and just had a sort of anomalous experience that I had no vocabulary or context for, that put me completely out of what I considered consensus reality. And it was basically, we were having a house party, and I got extremely very drunk and then extremely very high, which I've done plenty of times before with no extraordinary results. This wasn't an isolated incident for the time. But in this case, it became one, and had a weird out of body experience that kind of. So you know how like when people report like alien contacts or any sort of supernatural experience,
Right.
you wonder how in the world do you get to a place where you think that? Well, I can see where you get those ideas that you had a supernatural experience, because I had what was essentially a supernatural experience, but the only touchstone I had to compare it to was mental illness. So I assumed mental illness, whereas I can imagine someone else would have said angels, devils, aliens, or something else,
Right.
So, so I had this out of body, out of time experience that the best way I could describe the sensation of it was deja vu about having deja vu about having deja vu about having deja vu, to the point that it was excruciating pain.
Mm-hmm.
And the experience was of cyclical time. It was, I couldn't tell you who Nietzsche was, let alone spell it back then. So the ideas of eternal recurrence were nowhere near something that I could use to describe this experience. So I was out there completely, unadorned with the language to deal with it. So I was having this experience of a recurrent life, and of a time that just repeated over and over and over again. And the thing that was especially striking about it was that, it had the content of like a movie, but then expanded out into an entire lifeline. So it was just all this information that I couldn't imagine was actually residing within my brain. Like, obviously you can have the, dreams that are cinematic, but it was like that beyond anything I'd ever experienced before, which is, so as much as I was willing to concede that this is probably some sort of mental episode, a pathology, it was still striking because the pathology contained all these, blockbuster fireworks. There was a lot of content there that I didn't even know my brain could do. Even if it was a symptom of something, it was still like beyond what I was prepared to accept as possible. So once that happened, it kind of changed my life on a dime, because I couldn't just sleepwalk through my life anymore. It was very much the Ghost of Christmas Future experience. And so, and then the weirdest part was the next day I woke up and everything was back to normal. Like I was back to being who I was, where I was. And
really?
Everything was just back in its place, and didn't really have that much residual anxiety or anything. Like it really put me right back down where I was, just with that as a new reference point in what is possible. I was certainly concerned that it could return with increasingly dire results. But in the moment, I really did just wake up, sun shining, birds chirping, time to go to work.
So this was... oh, sorry.
No, sorry, go ahead, yeah.
Oh, no, I was just wondering, so was this like a one-day experience?
It was a one-day experience. And I was 19. I was a sophomore in college. And yeah, so I just woke up the next day with, an expanded horizon, but really no clue what to do about it, because again, I hadn't read any philosophy books. I hadn't read, I knew nothing. So my frame of reference was when I was growing up, my mom was schizophrenic. And so I just assumed, well, it's genetic and there it is. So that was my frame of reference. And then the path to RAW happens just a couple of months later. I'm taking an Indian religion and philosophy class. I'm actually taking Indian religion and philosophy and world religions with the same professor, who happens to be a RAW fan. And just as we're going through the material, the experience I had was all in this material. I had, like I said, I had no reference for it. Then he's talking about samsara, and I'm like, that's exactly what I saw. And so now I'm like super energized because this unexpressible experience I had has a vocab word that I can look up and read about. And it turns out that, you know, not only is there a trail that, you know, is relevant to that experience, it's thousands of years long with all, you know, all these roots spreading out all over the place. And so that puts me, I mean, I spent the next 5 years just reading everything I could get my hands on that was even tangentially related to that experience, just trying to get a handle on what it was, what it meant. And, you know, and the RAW actually comes in the picture pretty late in my reading. So it was actually Crowley that I found first, which was, it could have been disastrous probably. It's not the first guy you want to find, to be honest.
I know, yeah, Bob says that too, like, kind of put some warnings out there.
The thing with Crowley though is when you, like, if you have an experience like that and then you read Crowley, you go, that guy saw it too.
You know, the other way around, yeah.
Like, that guy knows what I'm talking about. And so if you want to connect with someone that knows what you're talking about, Crowley is very open about, like, having had those type of experiences. And I also with him, he's like, and it's a good thing. And I'm like, well, that sounds good to me. I prefer it to be a good thing as opposed to a bad thing. So,
well, if you're stuck thinking it's a bad thing, I mean, that could haunt you for a while, I feel like.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think that was there was, as much as I say, like, everything went back to normal, there was certainly, like, dark clouds overhead. Even if I hoped there was a silver lining. Like, there definitely was a foreboding of what it all meant. And it, you know, initially it certainly did not seem like it meant anything good.
Yeah, well, you're going through it. Yeah, that's for sure.
So I pick up the trail in Eastern philosophy, then get to, like, the Taoist stuff and Crowley and Watts, and then Leary and McKenna and Lilly. And then eventually that same professor gives my roommate, or suggests to my roommate to get a copy of Illuminatus. He reads Illuminatus, then leaves it in my room, and I just pick it up and read it in about a day and a half. Like, I don't know, it's like 700 pages. I just was glued to the thing. Because it was actually probably better to find RAW later on because I knew the references. So, like, I had read so much of the stuff that he was referencing in that I was actually primed to not be like, what is all this? But to be like, I know exactly what this is. And and he was also the most palatable to me because, you know, the whole thing about RAW is he's sort of like a nice guy everyman, whereas all those other guys are not. Like, that's not their shtick. Like, you know, Crowley is, you know, the wickedest man in the world, doesn't care about anyone but himself. And even Leary is like, I'm the psychedelic Jesus and all this stuff. Like, none of it is like, I'm a regular dude who had weird experiences. This is what I did about it and all that. And that's where RAW really pulled me in. And he was just speaking my language in a way that I could, like, kind of get deeper into things than I had done before.
Yeah, I mean, I always like Raw's metaphor of the puka too, because, I mean, I feel like with all these other things talking about, you know, you say samsara or the dark night of the soul, or these experiences which are very hard to put into words, and, you know, in the modern era, a lot of people just kind of tune out from that sort of way of talking about it. But with RAW, you know, and I remember he was saying, like, he likes the puka metaphor because nobody takes it that literally. That's kind of why it's so difficult to put into words, is like, you know, even with alien abductions, if people like take it too literally.
You take it too literally, and then it's like, well, where did the aliens come from? Why didn't anyone take a picture of it? You know, it kind of breaks down a little bit if you latch onto something.
Right. I mean, even like, I mean, you're saying deja vu, and sometimes even with deja vu, I almost feel like, I don't know if that's quite the right term for it. I mean, how long did it take you before it felt like, oh yeah, I've been here before? Do you know, was it like an immediate, like, feeling of familiarity, or did it take a while to piece it together?
No, it was, because it wasn't an intellectual thing. It was it was a sensation thing. It was like putting your hand on the stove and saying that's hot, not me saying that's a stove, therefore it's hot. So it was more, I'm like super practical about this stuff. So the deja vu thing, my guess is that my brain was storing its short-term memories in the long-term memory bucket.
Huh.
So it was taking everything that I was experiencing in the moment and accidentally treating them as if they were long-term memories that I had already experienced. Like, I don't think that it was actually, I don't think the experience was correct. I think it was, I had the experience of it, but I don't know that it was actually correct.
Right.
Or at least, you know, like you got to have that little bit of, well, it could also be this, or it could be that, or it could be that. I don't like to get stuck in one interpretation of it. And the thing especially about that experience is it's so multifaceted that I could describe it 15 different times and come out with 15 different stories because there was so many different nooks and crannies to the thing. And it really was an experience outside of time. I think the neurochemical equivalent would be when your alarm wakes you up and you hit the snooze button and you have a dream that feels like the dream was 10 hours long, but it was only 10 minutes. It was like that, but all night long with all these little pockets of, eternity nested within one another. And then so with RAW, with the puka metaphor, so that's what he did for me specifically that I found most helpful, because I had picked up Crowley's Koranzan metaphor. That was his experience that I was like, oh yeah, that's what I got some of that. So I was walking around with this metaphor that was essentially an unspeakable demon, and which is not the best way to go about, I think, thinking about this stuff. So he was, so I basically asked him, I was like, because he hints at having had a similar experience throughout his books. And so when I was taking classes with him at the Maybe Logic Academy, I had this thing where I could email back and forth with him. And so I just asked him, I was like, what about these types of experiences? Like, what do you think about it? And I specifically asked about Koranzan, and then he responded by sending me like 60 pages of reference material on the puka. And really? Being like, don't think about it this way, think about it that way. And it made a lot of difference. And I never went back to thinking about it in those like occult terms. I started thinking about it in like slapstick literary terms, which is like a much more fertile ground for this sort of stuff.
Yeah, I feel like there's something about the sort of Irish way of thinking about it. I don't know how much of that is just the way Bob talks about Ireland, but there's more of like a lighthearted approach to the puka, at least, even though there's a darker aspect to it.
And the cool thing is it also like incorporates the idea is like, he will fuck with you though.
Yeah,
like that's why it sucked, is because the puka will fuck with you. But but it's funny that he's doing it because he's a trickster. He's playing a joke on you, and that's much better than Crowley's demon that's trying to eat your soul or whatever he's. I don't even remember what it was.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was definitely helpful.
Yeah. And then I don't know. Have you come across any other explanations or terms or just ways of looking at it since RAW? Or
yes, I did actually. Michael Washburn, who I've only encountered him through one book, The Ego and the Dynamic Ground. He's I think it's called a transpersonal psychologist. So I just happened, this was in my phase when I was just reading everything. So his theory would seem to be that we have this thing called the primal repression. So when you're born, you're in a symbiotic relationship with your mom, because you're the same being for a long stretch of time, and then you're so completely dependent in the infant stage that you might as well be the same being, even if you're no longer physically attached. And that you then go through this phase where you basically repress that unity into your individual selfhood. So you say, I'm not a part of this dynamic interaction. I'm my own thing. And so you repress your connection with the outside world and assert your independence, and that those type of experiences are basically that lie coming unraveled. And if you don't have the reference to understand that that's what's happening, that it appears as if it's a supernatural attack, because it's like this like completely fundamental aspect of yourself that is being undermined. And so the only way for yourself to process that is by this like larger than life assault on your very existence. And so and I was like, it made a lot of sense to me that like, yeah, that's kind of true, that you start out, you know, unable to do anything but recognize your interdependence with the world. And then somewhere along the lines, you forcibly forget that. And for me, it was true that was also the initial experience that led to like more Taoist and Buddhist reorganizations of what I considered the self to be. So, you know, instead of considering myself to be this closed off individual, I began to realize that no, I was in interaction with everything around me. I was changing my environment while my environment was changing me, and that I was actually more of a nexus of exchanges than I was like, I am Bob and I do what I want to do. And, you know, so the idea that experience was a cracking of that falsehood made a lot of sense because that's how I actually experienced it chronologically.
Yeah.
And also, so from him, and so this was back in the, you know, I guess things are still sort of this way, but also in the early internet, when you like read a book by someone and you could just fire off an email and they'd respond. So I wrote to this guy and I was like, I had this experience. I think it connects to what you're saying. And my big question at the time, especially as someone who was trying to do art, was, is it helpful to talk about this stuff for other people? It's like, basically, am I going to trigger this experience in other people in a negative way? Or is it helpful to bring this up before they have the experience so that then they have the context so they don't experience what I experienced, and instead maybe have a more integrative, you know, apprehension of this dynamic? And he was certainly like, no, it's better to talk about it. It's better for people to have a clue that this kind of experience is possible, as opposed to them getting blindsided like I got blindsided.
Yeah. Oh, that was
you know,
Bob who said that? Or,
no, that's Michael Washburn.
Oh, okay.
That was the ego and the dynamic ground guy. So he was like, don't be shy about incorporating this stuff into your work, because it's probably going to be helpful for someone to have a clue that this kind of experience is possible. Certainly not everyone's going to have it, because, you know, some people have like more like traditional and I guess compatible life experiences with consensus reality, and I don't think that's bad. I'd like, if anything, it might be better. But some people are not gonna, that veneer is not gonna crack for them, and that's fine. But if you want to be useful to the other people, that maybe it is good to be like, hey, I had this experience, and this is what I think it means. And if you get that, and it seems to have happened like overall in our culture, that like this kind of stuff is way more out in the open than it ever was when I was like, I mean, like by and large, like I remember I couldn't believe seeing True Detective on HBO, and they're talking about eternal recurrence and time is a flat circle. If I had seen that stuff when I was younger, I felt like I would have had a less tough time of it, as weird as that sounds. Just I mean, because I was so when I heard the word samsara, which is you know, it's basically another word for hell, which is like the endless death and rebirth of the self through time, and it's all like infinite suffering. I was like, oh, thank God, it's beautiful. That's great. because I'd seen it and now there was a word for it. And, as in ceremonial magic, if you know the word for something, it gives you some control over it.
Yeah. I remember thinking early on with like things Bob was talking about, or even like Alan Moore, because Alan Moore also, I guess that's a coincidence, like he got me into Robert Anton Wilson too. That just that feeling of like you can't understand this stuff too quickly. It's a little dangerous to comprehend too fast.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And I mean, but for me, it was like he did prepare me in a way. I don't know why. I just sort of felt drawn to what he was talking about. Like maybe there was something there. Maybe some part of me did know, but I just really felt like there was something there, that he was something important or worth listening to that Bob had. And I mean, I would agree with Washburn too, that it's like probably better to put it out there, so that people aren't totally caught off guard. Have you had any experiences that you feel like are still too far out there to talk about? Like even within, I mean, not that you have to tell all here, but just that like.
So I will say that first experience was definitely a part of a trilogy. And so I was living in a house with my friends, and every year we would switch rooms. And so I was kind of psyched to get out of that room because it just felt like cursed a little bit. So I switched rooms with a friend of mine down to the basement, and made it over as nice as I could, and it was just a lovely, lovely place. And that's where I was studying Buddhism and Taoism, and was starting to get into Leary and RAW and all that stuff. And especially, I was just, at that point I was especially into the Indian religion and philosophy stuff. And so I ended up having basically what was the opposite experience of the samsara experience. But in this one, much like the first one, it was also chemically aided. Someone had left a couple of Adderall and the 4-foot bong in my room, and so I availed myself of these things, and had never really done speed before, and so and then with a little booster from the 4-foot bong, realized that samsara and nirvana are talking about the same thing, just from different perspectives, which when I say that just in the normal context is not that interesting, but in the state of mind I was in, it was a shocking revelation, because I had been chasing this concept of nirvana as an existentially transformative state of being. Whereas I then realized in a flash that it wasn't, that it was just a different way of looking at the same old shit. And so it's basically like, oh, enlightenment is right here, right now. And if it's not, it's nowhere. And it is right here, right now. And in that state of mind, I could see it very specifically, and I fell over. And when I hit the ground, I entered into what would be a Samadhi state. And the funny thing was, so my professor had always described Samadhi as just like regular life, but 1 foot off the ground. And when I stood up, I experienced myself as if I was floating 1 foot off the ground.
So, is that like Satori?
Satori, yeah.
Samadhi, Satori.
Yeah. So, and then I sort of realized that I was in an altered state and knew enough about like imprint vulnerability that I was like, I have to embed this as much as I can, like this insight, this perspective, because it's going to go away. And so I got out a notebook and I wrote all the way through the notebook describing everything that I was experiencing. And then I got another one and I filled up that notebook, and I got another one and I filled up that notebook. And then I went back to the first notebook and wrote over everything in that one. Because the idea was basically that I was tattooing my subconscious. I was embedding, threading this insight into my subconscious, and just wrote. And again, much like the first time, woke up the next day back on Earth and also with the intuitive warning that it would never work again, that I could not get to that place by using those chemicals again. And, no. And I won't touch this stuff now. Like I won't eat speed because it just makes me sick. It was a one-time deal. And and in some ways it was the reverse of the first experience, and each being kind of equally false. One being a too dark interpretation, the other one being a too ecstatic interpretation of it. But they did kind of balance each other out in a way where I could be like, all right, this is where I'm getting crushed by the thing. This is where I'm getting elevated by the thing. And so you kind of come to know it through its extremes in a way.
The middle way, the middle path.
Yeah. So then I had, it was the next year, and it was time to switch rooms again. And so I switched to the room upstairs. And so now I know. Now, you know what I mean? So, or at least I'm deciding to know. I'm deciding I'm going to have another one of these experiences.
Oh, yeah.
And so I've read all of John Lilly, all of RAW. And so now I know about metaprogramming. I know about sigils. I know, and so through Grant Morrison, I got into the sigil stuff, noticing that it only worked from your individual perspective. Meaning if you did sigil magic to win $1 million, you're probably just going to find monopoly money. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't affect reality. It affects your perception of reality. And so, which is basically just another term for metaprogramming. So then I took sigil magic and metaprogramming and put them together into basically the same thing. I then, with enough anticipation of how my mind worked, and with enough anticipation being like, I had that experience there, what do I want to have here? So what I did was I wrote and illustrated a short story that then involved me having all my chakras turned on, and then with the crown chakra getting turned on, and then left it blank, and then did the come down. So I left this blank spot in the story and just waited for reality to fill it in. And it did. Again, it was slightly chemically aided. I can't deny that, but it was, I just had smoked a bowl with my roommate, not even an especially large or potent one. And what I'd done a mural down in the basement, or not in the basement, in the living room, that depicted a character with the chakras and, all the way up to the crown. And I had just finished it maybe the day before. So I incorporated not only the story, then I did the mural, and it was all basically me working out all the stuff I'd read about ceremonial magic on myself, knowing it wasn't going to affect the world, but knowing for a fact that I could affect my own perception.
Right.
So out of the blue, my glasses broke. So I was wearing glasses. I had an arm that was broken. I was living in poverty at the time. So I had they weren't even my glasses. They were my roommate's glasses that were broken. And I had them the arm taped on. And so I walk into my room after having smoked the bowl, and my glasses break off my head. And I don't know, I'm wearing contacts now. I don't know. How are your eyes?
Yeah, fortunately, I haven't had to have glasses.
All right. So when your eyes are bad, light breaks apart. Like when I take my glasses off, light goes all into crazy fractal patterns and stuff. Uh-huh. So my glasses break off my head, and then there was a street light out my room, and the light was coming in through my window, and the light patterns started turning into shapes.
Oh, yeah.
And then the lights from the other places in my room started turning into shapes and melding around, and something started to happen. And since I was anticipating something was going to happen, I was kind of there for it. And so the light and shapes formed into a, from my perspective, completely, fully functioning and realistic mirror in front of my face. So I could see my own face reflected back at me in this mirror made of light. And then there was all these like light beings behind me that flew into my body. And then I just, like, after that, everything kind of like exploded for a second. And then I could then realize that it was my imagination that was doing it. So I could sit there and look at the light and then make stuff out of it. It was very like out of Terence McKenna's the Fractal Elves, the Machine Elf thing.
Oh, yeah.
It was straight out of that.
Huh.
And now that's probably because I had listened to Terence McKenna talk about Fractal Machine Elves, but I had the full-on experience of it. And that's where sort of like the experience kind of became like, I didn't want to go any further than that. And so again, the next day I wake up, everything goes back to normal. And I kind of thought that pursuing that much further would have been unhealthy. I felt like I was playing around with stuff that wasn't. There's a thing in Buddhism. They're called siddhi, which are basically supernatural powers. And I think the idea is that, like, so when through meditation and stuff, you think you're getting superpowers, but really you're just going crazy. And so I think after that, I was like, you know what? I don't know that I need to go any further down that. I was curious to see how far I could push it with this stuff, and saw that it was still all, as far as I could tell, internally generated. And so then from that, I was pretty satisfied. I was like, all right, that's I don't need to keep pushing things further and further. That was pretty far out enough.
So it sounds like with all these, there's like you've got some intention on having a certain experience, but then also some intuition about how far to take things, or
yeah. So I definitely like have in all of that. I was certainly trying something specific. I definitely wanted to. Well, no, I guess the second one was still a little bit spontaneous, but I definitely wanted to see, because I had this negative experience, and then I was kind of seeing the other side of things. So I guess I did want to see like how bright the light could get, having seen how dark it could get.
Right.
So I guess there was intentionality there, and then I wanted to see what I could do with it. And when it just turned out to be like mental masturbation, I was like, all right, there's probably better stuff I could be doing. Though I will say there was probably one more that kind of capped it off, which I also did the thing where you go to the jungle and drink ayahuasca with a shaman. So I did that too, and that was also like at the end of it, it was feeling more at home with ordinary reality, and not so much more wanting more abstractions. It was more like feeling at home with things as they appear, and because really, I mean, everything is already infused with magic and wonder, and everything that I was chasing in these other places, it's just harder to see. And so for the later stage of it was certainly just learning to see it in the ordinary.
So are you kind of like retired from that now? For sure. I for a long time now too. But I get to play around with it in a much safer capacity through art, making comics and stuff. So now I have this like
warehouse of ideas and, get to play with them on a different stage. And because I'd read this thing, what's Jack Parsons? You know who Jack Parsons is?
Yeah. Bob talked a bit about him.
So I was writing one of my comic series. It was Agnosis, and it had to do with some Enochian magic stuff. And so I was doing research on it, and I came upon something that he wrote that really was just coincidentally dealing with a lot of other stuff I had going on in my life. And it was just basically like, don't treat magic as something fantastic anymore. He's talking to himself. Don't treat it as anything fantastic anymore. Like, for you, everything is magic, therefore nothing is magic. So, pay your taxes, get a haircut. It was really like, get your shit in order, because everything's already magic. You don't got to go chasing the stuff around. You don't got to get into a trance to see that everything's connected, because everything's connected. Like, these aren't things that you need to chase anymore, because you already know that everything is connected and magic. So don't chase it anymore. Now you've got to do the harder thing, which is get your books in order and actually do something with it. And I definitely took a lot of inspiration from that. There was also, do you read any James Joyce ever?
I want to. I have not. I mean, since Bob raves about him so much, all I've seen are just like little sections online. I haven't actually read his novels.
I would if they weren't assigned in the classes I was taking with RAW, but I was obsessed with Joyce for a while. Like, I read everything basically, even to the point that I read his letters. So like all the his correspondence. And in his later years, when he's writing Finnegan's Wake, which is, as far as anyone could tell at the time, was glossolalia nonsense. They thought he was going crazy, right? So if you're writing, so he's fully aware that he's writing this book that everyone thinks is symptomatic of his insanity. So you watch him correspond with people, and his correspondence is pristine. Everything is so professional and clear and straightforward, because he knows, if I'm going to be the crazy visionary artist guy, I got to interact with people on a even keel, because then you're just crazy. You know what I mean? If you're crazy in your art and crazy in person, then the art is devalued, because you're just crazy. You don't even know what you're talking about. If you can't, you know what I mean? If you can't look someone in the eye and just say how's your day,
right?
The work doesn't work, because then that's just you doing the only thing you can do. That's what I took from it anyway. So and so Joyce, if he wasn't talking to his brother or Sylvia Beach, who is his financier, because with them he would play around a little bit, but if he was talking to anybody else, it was all business and all really above board. And so with that stuff, I started to realize that the mundane and the profound really do need to have a balanced relationship.
Yeah. It seems like a pretty Zen attitude to one foot on the ground,
For sure, yeah. Because again, I really do think I never thought Picasso was particularly good until I could see that he was painting photorealistically when he was 16.
Oh yeah.
And so when you see that, it was like, oh, it was a choice.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a limitation; it was a choice. And I think that informs the work in a way that makes it make more sense.
Yeah, or knowing the rules before you break them. I mean, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I actually take it back. I did try to read some of Finnegan's Wake. I mean, I just got a couple pages into it. I was like, I knew I wasn't in the right mindset for it, because it is a tough read.
I'll tell you. So I was pretty successful at reading Ulysses and Finnegan's Wake, only because my attitude was not what does this mean, but what does this mean to me?
Oh yeah.
And it's a completely different experience. Because people will they'll have a guidebook here and Ulysses here and be like, what does he mean by, what's on this street? Oh, that's on that street. I mean, and that stuff is fun too. I've read a lot of that is some of the fun in Joyce, is chasing stuff around. But in the actual read through, I just let it address me. And what does it mean to me? Especially Finnegan's Wake. Finnegan's Wake is a Rorschach test book.
Yeah.
And he does have a lot of stuff embedded in there. I mean, like layers and layers deep that is intentional, but it's okay if you don't get it. It's okay if you just let it speak to you. I think that's my reading of it.
Okay, that's good to know. I should give it another try with that approach, because I know Bob was like in like reading groups, wasn't he? And they would all kind of like pick it apart and see what they would find in it. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so he had us read that stuff in the Maybe Logic classes, and you would just watch the numbers dwindle in the class. Like the classes would start with like 100, 120 people, and by week 3, it was like 12 of us around still talking, because it really it tries to throw you off for sure.
Oh, really? So it sounds like art's like your main practice now that kind of gets you into that state.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. It kind of makes me think of Alan Moore too. I mean, it seems like maybe that's what it is for him. I mean, although people do think he's kind of like genuinely crazy, some people I know, but he seems like he's there to me.
I think he's putting that on. I think it's a persona. Like whenever you hear an interview with him, he just is the nicest, like most lovely person. And I think he built up a character for himself early on, and a lot of people just see that filter on everything. But I get the impression that he's like very much like how Raw was. Like when I met Raw, he was just a like ordinary dude. Like I went to his apartment, and it could have been anyone's apartment. Like you had no idea that it was Robert Anton Wilson's apartment. It was just like a nice guy named Bob. Like it really was. Like you would never guess.
I had a few other questions. I guess just speaking of, I don't know if you would know about these, but I think you mentioned something about like some friction between Bob's old publisher, New Falcon Press, and them trying to get the rights. And I was just a little curious about that. I mean, I don't know how much you want to go into that, but
I don't mind. But, I don't know how much still stands, because I worked for New Falcon for a couple of years without really like knowing too much about them. I was making fun of one of their covers. That they did some really, really low effort covers on some books, like really bad stuff. At the time, I was working for a record label, and I was doing 100 to 125 album covers per day. So to speak to the quality of work that I was allowed to produce, and a lot of their covers look like stuff that I would do when I was doing 125 covers in a day. And this is the cover for Cosmic Trigger, like it's supposed to be amazing. And they just got some clip art and threw the words Cosmic Trigger on it. Like it was really bad. And I think Eric Wagner, author of the Insider's Guide to Robert Anton Wilson, and just like overall cool dude and raw scholar, I think he maybe relayed that message to New Falcon that your covers are bad, and I know someone that could maybe make them a little bit better. And so I got to do a bunch of raw covers, some Leary covers, and a bunch of stuff there. And I think the reason why I got to do so much stuff is because I worked cheap. I think that was my main selling point to that. And so, again, I didn't have much interaction with them, other than just like sending in art and getting a check from them. And then, years later, there was all this like weird controversy with them where like, because the guy that ran the company was the son of Christopher Hyatt, the guy who wrote Undoing Yourself with Energized Meditation and stuff like that. And so there was a split in the company when he died, and the people that were running it were no longer running it, and his son started running it. And his son was like, my dad gave me his company because that's what he did, because he's my dad and wanted me to have his company. And everyone else said that he showed up there on his deathbed with a contract and was like, sign away your it was like a soap opera story, And I had no idea who was right or who was wrong and all of that. So, and then there was like all sorts of other like crazy stories that would pop up that I had no context for deciphering what was true and what was not. So, and then eventually, like, I stopped wanting to work with New Falcon just because they like the kinds of books they wanted me to do covers for weren't interesting, and like they were getting really picky. Not New Falcon, but the authors. You know, when there's an unknown author, I don't that they're like extra picky about their stuff. And I'm
Right.
I'm not spending any more time on this. I'd rather you not give me the money than spend another second doing this. And so I hit a couple of those where I was just like, keep the money. I'm not doing that. Like I got by it a couple of times. Have you ever done a sarcastic draft when people send you notes?
Oh yeah, for sure.
I'm like, okay, that's what you want it to look like? Okay, here it is. And then they were like, actually, I'm like, yeah, that's what
Yeah.
I did some sarcastic stuff, and then I just realized, like, I'm like, what am I doing? Like, I don't need to mess with these people.
Well,
So I walked away at that point. And so then I guess, I don't know specifically if there was a reason other than just wanting to do their own thing of why the Raw books left New Falcon and went in-house. I mean, because it could have been that there was some funny business, or it could have been just like, hey, we want to have control over our own stuff.
Right.
So to that point, I don't know why there was a split. Mm-hmm. And then there was just I think there was a problem with some of the art for Prometheus Rising, and this happened a bunch of times. Prometheus Rising had happened. Cosmic Trigger had happened. There was another like old Discordian book where it happened, where New Falcon wanted me to do all new interior art to replace the original illustrations for
stuff. Were those Bob's drawings or no? I thought he was.
No. But they were. I felt that they were like, they belonged in the book. Like I was like, keep the original illustrations. Like, I don't have me. Like, there's no reason to redraw this stuff. Because I mean, they've been a part of the book. They work perfectly. I was really into preserving the artifacts of those books more than I was like putting my stink on them. Mm-hmm. So each time it came up, I fought against doing new art. There was a couple of times I did supplementary art. What is it? Zen without Zen Masters. They wanted to get rid of all the art and have me do new. And I said, no, keep the old and I'll do supplemental stuff. So yeah, it was the same thing with Cosmic Trigger. I was like, no, leave the existing art because it's beautiful. So I guess when Hilaritas was going to do Prometheus Rising, I think New Falcon wouldn't give them the rights, and were talking about redoing it. And then I just reached out to New Falcon. I was like, let them have the art. Like, what are you doing? Like, what benefit does it have to like not let them have the art to this book? And it went through lawyers and all this stuff, and somehow it got worked out. They gave me credit for like untangling it, but I don't know that I did much more. Just be like, pretty please, you know, and I haven't heard from New Falcon in forever. I don't know if they're still around. I mean, if you ever go on the internet reading about them, the stuff you'll read is all over the map. Like, some people are like, no, he's great, and other people are like, he's not so great. I don't know which is true.
Right. Yeah, I was just curious because like I haven't been able to make heads or tails of it either. Like, just things I've heard.
Yeah, no, the whole thing of how he got the company remains. I couldn't believe it when I read it because it really is. It's like a bad movie of the week story, and it's appropriate that like it's completely unclear which is true. Like, anything in that world. Really hard to. You know what I mean? Because like that's the whole point is different perspectives make up the reality, and it's like demonstrating its own philosophy in action.
Makes you wonder if it's a marketing play.
Exactly.
Hyatt was interesting to me. I mean, his book Undoing Yourself, I don't know if you ever did any of those exercises or
no, not, I did that one. I did some illustrations for, but I didn't do any of the exercises. I did draw a bunch of stuff for it though.
For me, that was kind of what like led me into my whole experience was, I mean, it was like years of RAW, like kind of prepping me for it, and then somehow like Hyatt's just set me off.
Because his stuff's more aggressive. That was the vibe I got anyway. That his was more like, his vibe was more like consensus reality is a lie that you need to break free from.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the vibe I got from him. Whereas Rawls was more like, some people see things this way, some people see them that way.
Yeah.
If you do this, you'll see it even another way. From Hyatt, because he did that. I did a cover for Energized Meditations, but I did interior art for the Psychopath's Bible, which was his other book. And I think that one definitely has a more aggressive vibe to it.
Yeah, sometimes I wonder if he's doing like a character, kind of like we were talking about earlier.
Oh, no, he definitely is.
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever watched him talk?
Oh, yeah.
He's very even keeled. Like when he talks, he's like another Raw.
Uh-huh.
So I think he's definitely putting on a character. I think he's doing the Crowley bit.
Yeah.
Crowley bit.
Although he kind of competes with Crowley, or he says he does. He kind of puts Crowley down.
He wants to one up him.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Some other questions? Yeah, I'm just going to kind of jump over the place, if that's all right.
Please.
I was wondering if, because I know Rawls, if I remember the jumping Jesus phenomenon correctly, is about, as information spreads, like we're supposed to come to some sort of, collective higher consciousness as a species. I was just wondering if Bob had considered the inverse of that with like misinformation spreading too in the age of the internet
I don't think that he did. I think that no, it's possible that he did. So most of all of the like long-term thinking that he did was always like leading towards something great, it seemed like. So like the jumping Jesus phenomenon would lead to better and better conditions.
Right.
So I don't think he specifically saw the like McLuhan-esque reversal that more information leads to more ignorance. I don't know that he, I think he was too much of an optimist to predict that part of the process. But I remember back in the Maybe Logic days, he kind of did predict what we're seeing now, like politically. But he thought it was going to happen sooner. I remember him saying that basically the United States would be ungovernable by 2008. He was pretty pessimistic politically towards the end. And that was like one of the things, like our interactions were a lot of times like it was weirdly reversed because I'm the one playing the optimist to Rawls' pessimist.
Right.
And so I'm being like, no, things will be great. There will be the youth will save things. And so he politically he was pretty pessimistic towards the end, and kind of did, I think, see the split that we ended up with. But yeah, I don't think either McKenna or Raw saw I think they were pretty dogmatic about no censorship means that truth rises to the top, which is which a lot of people thought. I mean, that was the whole techno-utopian thing forever. I think Rushkoff was the first one to sound the alarm, being like, no, that's not how this is going to shake out.
I'm not familiar with that.
Douglas Rushkoff. He was another influenced by Raw. He was friends with Leary at the end of his life. And so he's sort of like, if McLuhan was around, if McLuhan was Gen X, that is what Rushkoff is. And he started out as like a techno-utopian like everyone else, but definitely by early 2000s was being like, no, this isn't going the way you think. And he also taught at Maybe Logic, and I was also like, I remember playing the optimist to his pessimist, and then when things actually turned out exactly the way he said, I was like, oh well, I'm right about that one.
Yeah, well, I guess he was always conscious of his optimism as like sort of like a choice in perspective too, not necessarily something objective.
Not prophecy, yeah, for sure.
Oh, yeah. It was good because I mean, one area found myself disagreeing with Raw a lot is, and Leary too, is kind of like their aggressive optimism with technology and where it's going to take us. I was thinking about that too with the metaverse announcement recently. I don't know if Raw had any insight on augmented reality or virtual reality or anything like this.
I know Leary did. Leary was in early on all that stuff, and again, at the time, Leary and McKenna saw all that stuff as basically legalized psychedelics, like a version of the psychedelic idea space that couldn't be outlawed, and saw it as a positive. And I don't think quite anticipated what it would actually be like in reality. I don't know that Raw went that far. I remember it was kind of funny. I remember. Do you remember when string theory was like the big thing?
Vaguely. Yeah.
There was a brief time when like that was like considered the next like model of physics that everyone would take seriously. And I remember I wrote this whole thing. I'd read a couple of books about string theory, so wrote something about like where I intertwined string theory with the 8-circuit model, and I sent it to Rawl, and I was like, "What do you think?" And he was like, "I mean, I guess I don't even know what string theory is." And his point being like, I there's so much out there that I don't have time to know everything that's happening in the world right now. Like my head is still sort of stuck back where I come from and isn't really aware of all the groundbreaking stuff, which was it was a very, because at the time it really thought like that I could ask him anything and that he would know all about it and steer me in the right direction. And it was so crazy for him to be like, never even heard of it. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, now I think it's like some hologram model, like we're inside a black hole and the universe is like...
got really sloppy, didn't it? Like it went all over the place. Yeah, I think I read that. That was around the time when I stopped trying to keep up because everything kept changing so much. And that's exactly what he said. It was basically everything was changing so fast that he couldn't really keep up with it.
I feel like we've kind of hit a point where it's sensory overload or just too much coming in all the time. And increasingly it feels like we have to be plugged in to whatever the latest update or whatever it is.
Well, and I feel like clickbait messes everything up too, because anytime there's any progress on anything, it's announced as if it's like, how many times have you read a headline where cancer's been cured? Like it's all the time, like, or a specific form of cancer, or, there's always all these breakthroughs. And then it turns out not to be exactly what they're saying it is. And then they announce it again 2 years later, and it's still not exactly what they're saying. And it gets, you just kind of get numb to it. And it's tough to tell what's an actual breakthrough and what's just a science website that wants to make a couple of bucks that day.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I've been trying to sort through some of that stuff lately, and I mean, it's hard when you're also just trying to live your life, because it's like you said, you could just go into it forever and ever and ever. But I guess I try to spot the untruths more than the trying to determine.
Well, that's the benefit of being like, I'm a science fiction cartoonist, so I can just take in whatever is useful to me. It doesn't have to be true because I'm writing fiction. Which has been a tremendous relief of like dealing with things on an imagination level, and not thinking that it's my responsibility to unravel the mysteries of the actual universe, whereas it's more fun to play around with the possibilities of an imaginary universe. It's a little bit more fun to chase things around when it doesn't have the onus of having to be true.
Yeah, that's interesting. Are there any projects you're working on right now that you could talk about?
I'm finishing up something I've been working on for about 20 years. So I had these 2 comic book series, Agnosis and Buddha Fart, which are actually just one storyline, broken up into 2 different styles. So Buddha Fart is sort of like a more like underground comedic take on the material, and Agnosis is more of a straightforward, like science fiction, superhero-y looking kind of thing. And then they sort of intertwine and crash into each other and kind of conclude as one story. So I'm about 215 pages in and have maybe about 15 to 20 left to go. And so I'm kind of excited I've been serializing it and have released various iterations of it over the past 20 years. But I'm actually getting to the point where I can just slab it between two covers and call it done.
Oh yeah. Nice.
So I'm kind of now that the end is in sight, it's actually like pulling my attention a little bit more. And then, obviously, whenever you're working on something, the next thing is all you want to think about. Mm-hmm. So I have a bucket for all my ideas that I want to do instead of what I'm supposed to be doing. Mm-hmm. And so I'm putting all those ideas in a bucket and calling it Gloria Discordia. And that's the way where it's like I want to generate a bunch of public domain intellectual property and just release the comic out into the world, and then release the characters and the design and clip art, and just kind of let it be this thing that is both me telling a story, but also me just putting resources out into the internet. Because have you ever gone on Google Images and tried to find a reference for something and all the examples are terrible?
Well, yeah. Or sometimes the frustrating thing for me too is you're looking for some animal or something, it gives you a bunch of car products or something that's named after the same thing. But yeah, I know.
But I go and I look for an apple, and this is the World Wide Web, everyone's repository of resources, and all the reference images that I can use for an apple suck. And so I'm I would like to replenish that well a little bit myself, and just nice. Because there are a lot of good public domain resources out there that you can use for stuff. I used a lot in the New Trajectories thing. So I would like to give back a little bit to that bucket of the commons. And so Gloria Discordia is kind of, because, thinking Principia Discordia, I think its relevance is somewhat due to its public domain nature. And so kind of want to follow that along a little bit and give some resources back out, because I've certainly taken plenty from the public domain. Mm-hmm. So would like to give some back. That's
really cool.
The pandemic messed up my plot line, though. I got to rewrite the whole thing.
Oh, really?
Because it had a pandemic in it.
Oh.
And a split in society from the vaccinated and unvaccinated. And it was going to be money-based in mine. Some people could afford it and some people couldn't, as opposed to in reality where it's just some people want to take it and some people don't. But my whole storyline got completely screwed up by reality. And so I had to rework, because I can't do it now because it happened in real life.
This was before the pandemic ever hit, or? Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so my inciting incident is all jacked up, and my reasoning for a lot of things happening, I just have to come up with something else.
That just makes it more interesting to me that you have this.
Yeah, but I wanted it to be more disconnected from our reality. So if I do it with the pandemic now, it's talking about this pandemic, which wasn't my intention. I didn't want to talk about something in this world. I just wanted to create, kind of a universe in a bottle. So and obviously I just want the connections to be buried a little bit deeper, not quite so surface level.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel that's the only way to kind of get things to sink in, or to get certain messages across.
For sure, because you're going to have people fighting you from the get-go if the connections are too obvious, because they're going to. And also, I also have really, as I've gotten older, really embraced my ignorance. I know that I don't know enough about a lot of things to harp on certain interpretations of it. And so, if I try to get too specific, I'm not going to have the resources to really dig in and be right in a significant enough way.
Yeah, it would have to be for something you've got a real depth of knowledge on. Probably.
Exactly, and I'm a generalist by nature, so I have broad strokes at best. And so if you get too specific, that's the crazy thing about having kids is they it really exposes your ignorance.
Oh yeah.
They want to know specific answers about how this stuff works. And my generalist stuff is not good enough. They're like, yeah, but where does that come from? And where does that come from? And how does that happen? And like, you know, every inquiry that the kids start, it always chases me into, I don't know.
Yeah.
20 times a day, I have to admit, I don't know. You know, we'll look it up and we'll read into stuff, but just I am reminded over and over and over every day that I don't know. And it's actually, like, at a certain point, it's actually kind of comforting because, like, you know, of course I don't know. How would I know?
It's good they're questioning things too. Like, hopefully they keep that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, they don't so much ask me questions as like relentlessly interrogate me about the nature of the world. Like they're trying to like, we know you know something, old man.
Were you a fan of Carl Hess at all? Or I know Bob did.
I don't know Carl Hess,
but I think he had that generalist approach too, where it was cool is that you should know something about everything, but you don't have to know everything about something.
No, that sounds about right to me.
Yeah. And then, so I know last time we talked at the Maybe Day Zoom, we were talking about maybe other ways of putting your art out. I know you were exploring collective or the commons at the time, and if you were thinking about like crowdsourcing at all, or any other approaches, or
So right now I have like a Patreon account. But I think I'm shutting it down because that's not like really what my production style is like. I feel like with a Patreon, you got to be like constantly engaged to make it worth people's while. And then also you kind of have to hold stuff back from everyone because you got to give those people something that's like exclusive, or I don't know. It feels like just not what I want to do. So I think I'm going to turn that off. And the stuff that I was doing on there, I'm going to do for free. And then I think I'm going to try Kickstarter to like, for specific print projects. I think that makes more sense. Cause I need to be able to disappear for a couple of months and bury my head in a book and like do like, you know, get it wrong a bunch of times and fix it and get it right. You know, and then I think paying for digital content feels a little bit weird to me. Charging for digital content feels a little bit weird for me. Charging for a book makes sense because I got to pay for the books. So I feel like doing like small scale Kickstarters, I think would be the way to go. Like small print runs, not charging too much, and just, you know, if it works the first time, maybe build up a little bit the second time, a little bit the third time, and just kind of grow it up from there. Because one of the lucky things is I'm kind of comfortable in my teaching job, so I don't really need the art to make money, and so I want to stop acting like it does. Because right now I kind of act like it does need to make money when it doesn't. Like at least not right now. And every time I've tried to like bend things into a business model, it just takes all the fun out of it. And just like, I don't know, it adds a level of awkwardness to it that I'm not that into. Whereas like, I think there, like, obviously I don't want to exclude the possibility of it making money, but I definitely don't want that to be in the forefront because in order for things to make money, it has to be something that's recognizable to a large enough group of people that it's no longer what I want it to be, because I want it to be this, like, you know, I want it to be whatever I want it to be. And, you know, whenever money gets involved, that's when, like, you know, like doing the book covers and being like, well, can you tone down the colors a little bit? Can you make this a little more action oriented? Can you do this? Can you do that? And my answer is always no, because I'm not a necessarily great artist. Like I'm an intuitive, like, epiphany based artist. When I have something in mind, I can do that thing that I have in mind. But then when you ask me to change it, what do you mean? That's what I saw. That's the thing. Right. And if you want it to be something else, I'm kind of not your guy. And so I think, and that's not a great way to make a living as an artist, being that way. So, It's always been like, find a way to make money other than art, so the art can be the art and not this other thing that I'm not that good at anyway.
To prevent the vision from becoming compromised or corrupted
if I could do it another way, I would do it that way, but I can't. Like, I'm not Picasso. I draw the way I draw because that's the way I draw. Yeah. I'm not a virtuoso who can, I'm a writer that learned how to draw in order to tell stories. Like, I don't sketch. When I am coming up with a drawing, it's all words, it's all script. Anything that I draw gets published. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have sketchbooks. Anything I draw goes into the final product. So a little bit, it's also like working within my limitations.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, I feel like I'm kind of in a similar place where it's like, I don't know, I don't want the money to become, because I'm trying to figure out like what's worth doing, and if it's all about the money at the end of the day, it's not really, I don't know, it just doesn't have that same fulfillment.
Yeah, no, I've had enough time doing this that I've had enough examples that anytime I've tried to do something because I thought it would make money, it didn't make any money, and I don't like it. Like, it's not. Whereas anytime I didn't, I just did it for fun, I'm still proud of it. I'm still I'm continuing a book that I started 20 years ago, and I'm still okay with that material from 20 years ago because it's complete. There's not a marketable bone in its body. There is nothing about this that anybody in the world needs or wants except for me. And so that's why 20 years later, I'm still like on board and being like, yes, this is the thing. This is the thing. Now it's going to turn out like Xanadu, it's that passion project that everyone's like, what is this? But it's allowed to be that. That's the beauty of like how the entertainment landscape has, or the art landscape has shaped up, is that everyone's an artist now. So like, I feel like the more valuable thing is to do it for yourself. And if it turns out that other people like it, then that's great. You get to enjoy that as well. But I don't know. I don't know that the future has more James Joyces and Alan Moores and these singular figures that dominate the landscape. I think it's going to be a much more introspective, small scale, niche thing. And so chasing that like, trying to be the next Stephen King or whatever. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I think that's not a thing that's going to be a thing anymore. Yeah. And so I'm just doubling down on my own idiosyncrasy.
Yeah. Cool. Anything else you wanna plug or have a last word or?
No. I mean, thanks for giving me an excuse to talk about some stuff. I don't normally talk about that stuff, but again, like taking seriously the notion that talking about it could be helpful for someone somewhere. I think that because my instinct would be to sweep all that stuff under the rug. And not be quite so open about it. But I think that there is value in putting that stuff out there because if it's still not quite so common that someone could have those kind of experiences and be like, oh, well, that's perfectly normal. I don't think it's quite so mainstream that it's not worth broadcasting a little bit more loudly. And kind of one of the best parts about RAW was kind of creating a context for weird experiences that didn't disqualify you from having a normal, happy life.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's valuable to, kind of just tease that thread out a little bit and keep it going, that it's okay to have some of this extracurricular nonsense happen in your life and that you can use it to your advantage, because I certainly did. It definitely helped me out along the way, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. So just in case, maybe even no one will know that it helped them along the way, but maybe it'll pitch in a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I hope so.
Right on.
So it definitely helped me clarify like things like retrospectively. I mean, I don't know. For me, it never gets old. Like having new ways of looking at it or putting it into words, because it's so difficult to do. And,
oh no, for sure. Yeah. And again, it's so outside of what is generally considered, I don't know, a acceptable means of perception that, I don't know. I still think it's a little bit, I think it's so tangled with idea, like mental illness, and the illness part of it is, like, because so anything that's not ordinary is illness, right? We don't have another word for it. We don't have a creative reorganization of thought. It's either you're thinking about things in the normal correct way or the wrong bad way. And I think with Raw, I think he creates that other lane where it's it's that like underworld journey. What is it? And this is also from that Ego and the Dynamic Ground book, which is regression in the service of higher integration.
Oh,
so
yeah.
You're having a bummer time, but it's for a purpose. You're going to go through this and kind of end up actually more stable than you started. And that's not really a commonly thought scenario here, that you can have a breakdown that then leads to a build up that's actually better than you were before. And so I think that's it's a possibility that should definitely be boosted a little.
Yeah, I mean, that's where Alan Moore too kind of made sense to me with it. Was it Solve Coagula, or maybe I have it backwards? But the alchemical breaking it down and then putting it back together. Or Terence McKenna too had talked about how he thought it was, it's like just a transformation, like a transitory state, but it's like part of growth and development. And then like if you don't get stuck there, like then it's kind of mental illness, but otherwise it's.
And I think most times that like those kinds of perspectives are elevated, it is from a stuck position, because you're seeing the problematic aspects of it. You're seeing the people that are stuck there and are kind of flailing about. And and so I think more models of it's a roadmap through Chapel Perilous that actually does lead out the door or at least leads to a funner corridor of the structure.
Yeah, I guess maybe I should ask you with one more question. If you thought Raw was trying to, like I said, just kind of help people through these, or do you think in any cases he was maybe trying to lead them, maybe not trigger it, maybe like create a sort of experience for them, or do you think it's really just only people who are going to be drawn to this who are likely to, go through something like that themselves?
Yeah, I wonder. I think he definitely was trying to help guide people safely through. I think that was, I think, because he talks about being called upon in person to help people that were having like a bad trip or something. So I think he definitely understood that there was a need for that. And so, I think in a lot of cases, I think that's what he hoped would be the result of his books. Though I also sort of get the sense that his books were written as a revelation to himself.
Oh, yeah.
I think he was writing for and to himself primarily. Though that may be because that's what I'm doing and I'm projecting. I'm definitely not communicating to other people when I make stuff. Now, as I've said before, if it turns out to be useful, that's fantastic. That is, I am speaking exclusively to myself through my work, to be honest, because I wouldn't know how to talk to anybody else. You know what I mean? Like, it would be presumptuous to assume that someone would need to hear a particular thing.
Yeah.
So all I can do is model behavior, and so that's where it was also like kind of okay if I'm if I'm wrong about this stuff, because then you can have an example of someone who's wrong. And you know what I mean? Like, so, oh, that doesn't work. Don't be like that. So yeah, no, I'm definitely exclusively parsing things out for myself and letting people watch. And if it turns out to be useful, because I think that's what a lot of other people have done, and it's helped me. So maybe if it's useful or entertaining or anything like that. So yeah, definitely talking to myself and letting other people watch. And I think RAW was probably pretty similar.
Yeah. That's kind of clarify like what it means to make something for yourself. And I can't remember if it was you or somebody else, but I think it was during the Maybe Day, maybe not, maybe somewhere else on like a RAW forum. They had basically suggested that the RAW lectures were basically people who just like to watch him talk to himself. So I'm just like, yeah, I can see that.
No, for sure.
But right, yeah, thanks so much, Bobby. Really enjoyed this.
Oh yeah, no, thanks for the opportunity, and the graphics on this are fantastic.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, the bunny stuff is
oh yeah, we're saying I love the puka, but yeah, hopefully the audio is good. I might have to rework it a little bit, but yeah, hopefully.
Oh yeah, no, I'm sure it'll be fun.
Yeah, cool. All right, thanks again.
Yeah, thank you. I'll let's do something again. Are you up for another new?
I would love to. Yeah, I was gonna say I could.
Cool.
This it never gets old for me. It's
awesome,
just effortless.
Cool. And then also, I was hoping. So when I go to make this final graphic novel, the one I talked about, I wouldn't mind pulling in some of the artists from New Trajectories, just kind of commission some chapters stuff.
Oh
yeah. Variant covers and stuff like that. So
cool. Yeah.
If you're up for it, I'll
absolutely.
It'll take me a while to get there, but I would love to have some like-minded artists on board.
Cool. Yeah. No, I love that.
Awesome. Great.
Cool. And plus, I don't know if maybe I should. Maybe I'll stop the recording at this point. We can talk a little bit. But
yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.